Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We have an exciting episode today. We have Alice Hu. She is a career astrologer, and she will be giving us some great insight today into some things we need to look for in 2025 for ourselves, our career, and beyond. Hope you enjoy it. Alice, thank you. Thank you for being here.
You're so welcome.
I want to share first how grateful I am to you because you were instrumental in my journey in starting The Rising 10 months ago. And I am just so grateful to you because one day you're like, Janel, you just need to start. Stop thinking about this and just start your own platform and get moving. And it really was the jolt I needed to get this whole thing moving. So for you, I'm so grateful. So to have you here today, I'm just so excited. So thank you.
Thank you. Such kind words. You were going to do it whether you heard it from me or not.
Thank you. But you have such a wealth of knowledge to share with us because I don't think people really understand, well, astrology. Now combine that with career astrology, right? And how this could really benefit us in our day-to-day lives. So first and foremost, tell us, what is career astrology?
So let's start with astrology first.
Yes.
Astrology, I believe, is more than a meme. It's more than talking about like your horoscope, which usually people read for their sun sign. That's easy to remember, like, the month that you're born. So if you were born August 1st, you're a Leo. I really believe that it is a powerful tool for introspection and for us to do the work and to understand ourselves better and just have better relationships in our lives. And from the lens of career, it allows you to first and foremost understand yourself, your values, your beliefs, your desires, your wants. And from that place of stability from within, you are able to have a lot more clarity around like, oh, this is how I want to spend my quote unquote 9-to-5 time. Do I want to work in a corporate job? Do I want to start my own thing? Do I want to do all of the above? Be a multi-hyphenate? There's just so many different possibilities, and astrology gives you some insights into potential like opportunities, challenges, your talents, your gifts, like where you're really growing towards, and kind of like places and characteristics and jobs and industries where you're stepping away from. So it honestly, every single time I do a reading, and you know this because you've done readings too, it's always a homecoming. And it's about understanding yourself and being like, wait, my intuition told me this, or I just started this. Like, how did you know? Because you already know.
Absolutely. I tell people that all the time. You have all the tools inside of you. It's just sometimes they need to be magnified, amplified, brought to the surface. And that's what your readings have done for me. Because originally I was skeptical. I was like, how is this going to make sense? Like, yes, I know a little bit about astrology. Yes, obviously I have followed other guides on career, but how does this come together? And that's the thing. I was so skeptical at first, but I've had my chart read by you multiple times. And what you said is so on point. It's a homecoming back to yourself. Every time I do a reading with you, it's like, Janel, like we're just reminding you here what you're put on here to do. And you know it.
It's like a recalibration of your internal compass. And astrology, there's like many schools of astrological philosophy, right? Sometimes people love to use it like predictively. Sometimes it's about like karmic stuff, about past lives. Like there's just so many different ways to slice and dice it. And I prefer stepping away from predictive astrology and just saying like, hey, this is like who you are. To understand who you are is to be able to feel empowered. To feel empowered also means you trust yourself. And when those things align, then you can take action and things just kind of happen for you. It's like, it's really kind of like one of those core principles of manifestation. Like, why does it work? Because you really believe it. You believe in yourself. You believe in your mission and the task at hand and what you're communicating. And that's why it feels right.
I love that because everything's aligned. You're kind of, it's all coming together. What do you think is the number one reason people come to you for a reading?
Well, it is because like during moments of transition and change, you're more open to exploring different modalities and tools, especially if the things that you had been using or people have referred you to like hasn't worked. It's a moment of expansion. So I think you'll probably know this story about Target. So I think it was like 8 or 10 years ago, maybe even well before. Target was using data to understand when like someone became pregnant. They knew like that you'd buy like shea butter, you'd buy like other creams or like other things, and they would know. And then they would start to send like targeted like mailers or emails, whatever it was. And people were upset because like, I don't want other people in my household or like people to know that I am pregnant. So
Sure.
like Target like knew that they were going to be pregnant, but more importantly, when you are pregnant, there is the opportunity for you to do things so differently, buying different products, like living a different lifestyle. And that talks to the change and the pivot moments in our lives, right? And that also is about career changes and pivots. There are some astrological milestones that I can tell you that I'm like, oh, this is probably when you're going to feel this. But increasingly over the next like years and decades, like people are just going to see astrology as a tool that they can refer to, and they're not going to be like, oh, I don't understand or I don't believe it. Like it's these pivotal moments where we feel so lost that we become open. And I think that's an incredible unlock for you to become expansive and beyond who you are, because where you are going is not like, you need to be more than who you are now. You need to be different. You need to be thinking differently to get to where you are, to embody your future self.
I love that. What has been maybe a piece of advice you gave to someone that transformed their life? Do you have a client that took something from that reading and it just changed their life?
Time and time again, this is something I've learned for myself too. I have gotten a lot of coaches. I have done some certifications and spoken to a lot of mentors and all of that, you know, asking like, what should I do? What do you think about that? At the end of the day, it's about confidence. And when I have a conversation with someone, my intention is to allow them to feel seen. And because when you feel seen, then you become more confident. And so all the advice I always give and the insights I see like on your birth chart and like what's happening in the near future, maybe a little bit farther down the line, is for you to feel more confident. Something that really was interesting that happened a couple months ago was I had a client, and he's been like, I think to get his reading, I think twice now. And the first one, he was just in a really stressed state. He had a business that he'd been wanting to sell for years, and it had done really well during the pandemic and kind of just was like becoming quite stagnant. The deal kept on like falling through. There was a lot of like debt. And I told him, I was like, I think it's really about your energy. You have to be like more confident and say what you actually need, because I think they're just kind of pushing you around because it's not really, it's kind of like a side, let's say, priority for them, like not as important, but for you, it's very important. So I think when you assert yourself and say, this is what I need, people hear it, people feel it, the universe feels and hears it as well. So he told me he went back to the buyers and said, this is like really what I need. And it closed in 6
Wow.
weeks after it being in like limbo for like a year and a half, 2 years. And I'm like, all he needed was just to feel like, you know what, I deserve this. And at that point, also very importantly, he had made peace. If it didn't sell, it didn't sell. They would just kind of like pay off like and sell off parts of the business and just kind of be like, okay, this is what it is. And I think that detachment and that being like, you know, this is what I need, this is what I want, that confidence really came through.
It's so interesting because I think all it takes is an energetic shift. And this is what I think you're able to do for people. I know I experience this with my readings. I feel like you give me this change in perspective and then how to change my energy towards a situation.
Yeah.
And this is what you did for this person. You know, it is a shift, but it's great to get that nudge from someone. Like, this is how you should be feeling and responding. And people don't realize that that's the currency that the universe recognizes.
Yeah, I think that sometimes we get caught in these like emotional loops. I know I do as well. And you just need to kind of pull over.
We all
You got to get
do.
off the hamster wheel. You're like, this is not serving me, maybe being too negative or being too anxious, or, you know, it's really just about kind of creating that forward momentum. And I think that it's really less about the reading. It's more about the promise you made yourself when you booked the reading or you got your report, whether it's like a free or expanded version. It's just, you're like, I am dedicated to myself.
I love that. I know you don't focus on like predicting things, but do you ever advise people in looking at the year ahead and their placement? And do you make suggestions on when is a good time of year to sign a contract? When is a good time of year to look at, your finances and like where to pull the trigger on this? I know that there are times for that. So I don't know if you get into that.
Well, actually I do. So I guess like it's important for me to make this differentiating factor in terms of like certain astrologers, they'll just tell you,
right,
this month you're going to experience this, and very, very specific, or like you might get sick, you might get injured during this time, or someone in your life might pass. Like I don't like to talk about those things as definites because things are constantly changing. What I will say is like, okay, this is the theme that we're all kind of going to be kind of swimming in this year. This is what to expect for you. These are some very important dates where you can kind of see these types of themes come up. I keep it loose so that there is like, I give you kind of like the coloring book.
Yes.
Right? And then you get to color the way that you want to color. And just kind of just giving you a path of like, hey, this is a time when you might feel like really focused on health and wellness. This is a time when if you want a promotion, this is a really wonderful opportunity to kind of tee it up. So it's all opportunities. It's not set in stone. Just like when it comes to like dating someone, there's many different opportunities for the one person, for the many people. Like it's an infinite number of possibilities.
I love that you keep it so broad. And I think that really helps people not feel tied.
It's like, it's like broad, but it's specific.
Exactly.
I'm just like, Janelle, around this time, just be mindful of this. And in 6 months' time, you're going to feel in this way. At the end of like this 18-24 month cycle, you're going to feel X, Y, and Z. It's like specific enough that you're like, okay, that you're not like, well, what exactly is going to happen, but broad enough that you're not too stuck on, I'm like, you're going to launch your book on like March 13th, which is terrible because I've gotten readings like that and I constantly ruminate. I'm just like, it didn't happen, or is it going to happen? Like, is it just the timeline's a little bit pushed? It's not helpful.
Well, that's what I love when I get a reading with you. I feel like I'm in control of my destiny.
You always are.
But I feel sometimes when I've received other readings, I get pinned to like, don't leave the house on March 8th because that's the day you need to be, under the covers because it's just a day you don't want to be exposed. And then I start like ruminating and like, well, what's going on in the planetary system that I can't leave the house on this particular date? But with you, I always feel like there's this hope. Like, okay, like you're going through this, but like you have the power to shift it, or like you have me looking forward to something. Like, okay, the second half of the year, like things are going to get really good. And you go, oh, wow, like that. It gives you this, it shifts your energy upwards. You're not going down this like spiral loop of like what could be going wrong, and then examining like, okay, like every little thing that happens to you that day as like, oh, see, like it's almost like as if you focus on it, you get more of it. We know. So if you're focusing more on the negativity, you're obviously going to get that back. So really quick, can you clarify what is the difference between astrology and psychic kind of predictions and, mediums?
So I'm trying to see if I can get this right. It's just so different. I want to say that like all astrologers can be psychics, but not all psychics can be astrologers. It's kind of like one of those things. Ultimately, at the end of the day, when you're talking to like, say, an energy reader, like, an energy healer, a psychic, intuitive, medium, astrologer, like all those things, they're all pulling from the same place. It's like the energetic field that we all are connected to. And psychics, like they will tell you like things that'll happen, but there's also different ways of reading things too. And different, like everybody has a different style, right? Mediums, like they talk to people who have passed, but they also can receive like intuitive and psychic like hits and information. Astrologers, like depending on like their style and their like, philosophy and stuff, like they could have some predictive things that come in, like psychic things that come in. happens, sometimes it doesn't. For me, like the way that I do my readings, like there's a lot of intuitive information that comes through as well. And I just believe that astrology provides like a shared lexicon where I'm just like, oh, like this is something you can refer to, like looking at a Venus in Aries. You're like, oh, I can Google this some more. Versus when you're talking to a psychic, it's a little bit more intangible. And I think that's one of the reasons why I was drawn to astrology, because there is like a vocabulary. There is things that you can refer to after spending time with me. And I can pinpoint being like, hey, like this is something that you should pay attention to. So
Well, I love that because I feel like people need that. It's grounding. You're not just floating in outer space.
sometimes people are scared to get readings, especially like people, a lot of people come to me like they're first timers because like I have a very practical approach to astrology. And they're always like, oh, I'm a little nervous. I don't know what I'm like, am I going to be on the wrong path? And I'm like, I really have never met anybody who's like on the wrong path. They're just on a path. One of the possibilities for them. Is there something that would make them like happier? Yes, but there's a lot of like healing and learning challenges that can come through as well. And sometimes like they may not feel ready to embark on that journey. And that's okay too. You know, happens different times.
Absolutely.
in your life.
And I think that's why people are so skeptical to look into this further for their life or their career. But it really could help you be like a compass almost to like, and for you to get over certain hurdles with this information.
Yes.
So I think I guess what I want to tell the viewers is like, this is something you don't want to knock it until you actually try it, because it could be the thing that unlocks something in you.
Yeah.
Or if you're in a period of transition that, you know, you might want to explore this.
Yeah. So, you know, it's going to happen over the next 18, 24 months. Some people, you know, it's kind of like the bell curve of adoption, right? We have our early adopters who are already on this train of like spirituality and holistic modalities and wellness and stuff like that. But the bulk of people like haven't really experienced it. Over the next 18, 24 months, like everyone's going to have some sort of spiritual awakening or awareness, like, and they may feel a pull to be more artistic, to explore mindfulness, to start like an exercise routine, like something that connects them to their body and to like the earth, right?
Yeah.
And then some of us are going to actually feel it after this like cycle, like after 18, 24 months. They're like, you know what? I think I would love to go back to synagogue. I would love to go back to like temple or church or be more in community. Like it's happening whether we want it to happen or not. And also,
I agree. There's a shift.
also, like, there's a lot of interesting things happening right now, you know, like I've already seen, like, I'm very positive in kind of like the year ahead, the month ahead. And I always like give people the advice of like, these are things I think would be very helpful for you to manage the changes that are coming ahead that we're all going to be addressing in 2025 and 2026. But as we can see, there's a lot of unpredictability in the air, like, and that's going to be a theme because we're releasing control, we're releasing perfectionism, the need to know. And by destabilizing, then it's kind of like, there's a clarity that comes through. You start to understand like what feels right for you. So it's less about looking outward and more about kind of going inward. Yes, you can kind of read books, talk to people, listen to podcasts, all of that, but it's about that integration that's going to be happening. And we're not just blindly following people anymore.
Right. Did you have an awakening? Because you
Yeah.
touched briefly on this.
Yeah.
And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I have experienced is I had my awakening. You know, I had a dark night of the soul moment or multiple moments, and they all kept unlocking something in me. And then ultimately, you know, the floodgates opened.
Yeah.
Was that something similar that happened to you, or do you feel like you've always had these gifts?
No.
Like,
No.
you know, because so many people on the spiritual path,
Yeah.
it's either they had it when they were very young, like they knew they had certain abilities, intuitive abilities,
Yeah.
psychic abilities, whatever those abilities were.
Yeah.
Others had it, but it was like suppressed and like kind of started showing up later in life in hits. And then some people went through tragic
Yeah.
experiences. We call them the dark night of the soul moments.
Yeah.
And then you have this awakening. So did you have like a pivotal moment that you feel unlocked some of these gifts for you?
So I feel like there are a couple moments in time that I call them astrological milestones, where we can kind of be like, this might be a time where you will experience a spiritual awakening. One of them is a Saturn return. Happens when you're around like 29. It lasts for a couple years. And that's when I kind of had my spiritual awakening. And as we kind of like, move through 2025, like we will start to redefine spiritual awakening, because sometimes people are like, well, that's like weird, like all of a sudden like you're going and like being a different person and like running around the woods like naked or like chanting, or just like all of a sudden like you are like extremely religious. It's not about that. It's a homecoming. I want people to like understand it's a homecoming and a kind of like a realization. It's like, I can't remember in the Matrix, but it's like it's the red pill or the blue pill that he takes, and he's like out. He's like, oh, this is like a weird situation. It's really just like kind of like that first step forward where you start to deprogram yourself and being like, what is it that I want? And I went through many years of just like figuring things out of like what do I want to do with my life? Do I want to stay in my corporate job? And so like that's what I went through in my Saturn return. And the astrology, the mindfulness yoga was just so helpful. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I should start a business that explores this and maybe helps people. And that's really kind of how my business has progressed over the last 6 years, from really events focused to now like doing like readings. I really never thought that I would be the one teaching these principles and these things. And my Saturn return like really showed me like, oh, there's like I remember when I was like 25 or 26, and I would just think, I'm like, why would anyone want to be like a fitness instructor or like a yoga teacher? Like there is no upward mobility. Like, it's just like, how can you ever be paid like a considerable amount of money? And I teach yoga now.
I love it.
It was just really interesting. Like I just had that like switch. I was like, you know what? Because there's more to life than climbing a corporate ladder, and to like do that hour to hour exchange of like, I work an hour, I get this, or I work X hours and I get that. And people are feeling that. They want purpose. They want their why to be embedded in the things that they do. They want to be learning, and our current structures like don't provide that. So Saturn return's a big time for spiritual awakening. Your nodal return is also a big time too, and that happens around 36, 37. And a lot of people experience a spiritual awakening, quote unquote, in their 50s, because there's a lot of astrological moments that are just like, well, have you been making good on the promises like you made to yourself, like a soul contract? And that's why people get divorced. That's why they have like a midlife crisis. There's a couple 100%. Huge things that happen like in your 50s, which is why I believe your 50s is like one of the more challenging decades. 40s, pretty sweet. 60s also, like really the 40s. I'm like the 40s.
Well, I love 40. I mean, I love my life after 40, but that's when I had my awakening, and people around me probably were like, she's having a midlife crisis. But it wasn't a crisis. It was a comeback to myself.
Yeah.
It's that I forgot who I was because I was living, based on everybody else's dreams for me, or like whatever society expected of me. And so I veered way off track.
Well, you also have children.
Right.
So that can delay things too, right? Because you're really focused on raising your children and their needs. And so I'm sure you felt those pivotal moments during your Saturn return. And then it went away. You're like, oh, okay, that was just a crisis. But it comes back up again. You probably felt it again during your nodal return.
Yes.
And it's just been like simmering. And it's just collectively, we're all going through this like reckoning of just like, what are we here for?
I love that word.
What are we here for? It's very uncomfortable. It's more uncomfortable to kind of like pause and be like, is this right? Instead of just kind of like being on the path that you crafted for yourself, but you or someone otherwise.
Do you find that people do come to you in like a time of crisis? Like, we talked about that. Are a lot of people in crisis, or they're just in transition, or, they just want to know?
Well,
like,
I think
they're just curious.
I think like, this is something that like people say in the industry, like you attract people who are like you. So I actually attract a lot of like grounded people. Like every now and then, like someone probably is like a little bit more like anxious or like frenetic, but not really. I have a friend, she does similar work, and she's like always getting stalkers. And I was just like, And I'm like, and I looked at her chart and I was like, oh, it's because like you have a Scorpio moon, like you have like a, like other water signs in your big three, like you just have like people are really pulled towards you. Scorpio energy can like kind of like draw people who can be like a little bit obsessive like to you, or kind of like feel jealousy. And you and I have spoken about that too, like people that don't understand you. They're just kind of just being like, I don't know what's going on. Judgy.
Right. So thank you for joining us. We've laid some really good groundwork on what is career astrology with Alice, and join us for part 2 on what's going to happen in 2025 and how we can all prepare for a better year ahead. Thank you.